So this week's episode of Supergirl, which is Season 4, Episode 15, otherwise entitled Oh Brother, Wherefore Art Thou, has the big and massive introduction of Jon Cryer as Lex Luthor, finally introducing him into Supergirl and into the Arrowverse. How did it go? Well, let's find out.
You don't have to do this.
I'm doing this for us.
I know what my brother's capable of. We have to find him. The world can't live under a red sun.
The entire human race. They're gonna thank me.
You don't know what you're toying with.
I want to see if the Kryptonian pretender can bleed.
Let's find him and stop him.
Superman. We think he's invincible. I was the man of tomorrow, not him! Not him!
It's gonna flood the whole city.
They're gonna kill millions of people.
Mr. Luthor, have you anything to say before I render the verdict of this jury?
Superman made me do it.
Secretly allowed from prison due to failing health, Lex Luthor visits his sister Lena to seek her help finding a cure. Savvy as ever, Lena is suspicious of Lex's motives, but when she's faced with a life and death situation, she must decide how she truly feels about her brother. Meanwhile, Supergirl and Jon face off against Manchester Black, and James's sister Kelly comes to town. So let's just get the cat out of the bag straight away. How was Jon Cryer in this episode as Lex Luthor? Well, I was a bit skeptical going into this with his portrayal because I've never really seen the actor before, and looks-wise, it didn't really work in my head, and that first promo image they released of him wasn't very good, so I thought this could really go either way, especially when the trailers for this episode, and also for, I believe, the next episode, were actually pretty cool, so I didn't really know which way I was going to go with this. And at first, I was a bit iffy with him. I was a bit off and on with him. I kind of felt like there were some moments where he was being a bit too over the top and a bit too overly dramatic with it, which kind of reminded me of Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor in Batman vs Superman. It kind of gave me those kind of vibes. But as the episode went on, he became a lot more intense. He became a lot more grounded, a lot more subdued, and became a lot more of a threatening presence because of that. And overall, I'd say I definitely like Jon Cryer's perception of Lex Luthor, or his portrayal of Lex Luthor in this episode. I think it was a lot stronger as it went on. Like I say, it took me a little while, and I think it maybe took a little while to find the footing, especially in the first kind of scene. Like, this episode opens up with a flashback, and we get to see him there, and I think that in that particular scene, when he was going like full-on supervillain, it was a little bit too much, but then in the scenes after that, in the present day, I think it works a lot better. So far, I'm going to give a thumbs up to Jon Cryer. So Lex does come and visit Lena, and he's basically here to help her try and finish the cure for the Hyronel, because he's got failing health, and if, with the help of the Hyronel, he'd be able to, become stable again, would be able to walk again, and would become back to normal health. But obviously, we have not completely completed the Hyronel yet. It's not quite finished yet at this point, and Lena is very much aware of that, and she, even though this is Lex Luthor, one of the most evil men in the DC universe, she's not willing to test this thing on her brother just yet, because obviously it is still her brother at the end of the day, despite how evil he may be. And I really like their conflict in this episode. I like their dynamic, because I was interested to see, because that's one thing I was very, very interested and also worried about, was if they were going to portray the kind of, relationship between Lex and Lena well, because obviously Lena talks about Lex a lot. We've heard about Lex a lot in this show, but this is the first time we're actually seeing him, so I think they really had to live up to the expectations that's been set, and especially with their relationship. But it was very fiery. You could tell there was a lot of history there. You could tell that there was a lot of, not a lot of love going on there, and I feel like even though they do have a bond, they do have a connection, it's something that they're not too big of a fan of, and you can see just how manipulative Lex is. Like, Lex is really good at just talking to Lena and just getting him to getting her to, play into his shoes, and I thought that was really, really well done. And again, Jon Cryer, I think, nailed it, and I think that Lena as well, Katie McGrath, really, really sold it, and I think that overall, them two were just very entertaining to watch. Now, this is kind of the final episode for the conflict between Jon and also Manchester, and I thought that this was actually really fantastic, because David Harewood, who plays John Jones, Martian Manhunter, he was brilliant in this episode. His acting was on point. I mean, he is always good. He's one of the most consistent and strong actors on this show. But in this episode, the emotion and the anger and the pain that he had to emit through his character was totally felt. I think that he really did a really good job of just getting through to the audience and just speaking to them and saying, this is what I'm feeling, without, directly saying what he's feeling. He had to go through a lot in this episode, John, and I think showing that through David Harewood's acting was a great decision, because he was just really good at portraying those emotions. And, we've seen over the past few episodes that, Jean has been really stressed about Manchester Black. Like, nobody irks him like Manchester has. And in this episode, we actually see that Manchester completely burns Marin's grave to the ground. Jean's father, he burns his grave to the ground purely just to send a message to Jean. And this eventually leads to Jean actually killing Manchester. So Manchester is dead, apparently. He could come back, who knows? I mean, when I kind of look at these deaths on these shows, kind of similar to what's going on with Ricardo Diaz over on Arrow right now, there's been no official kind of press statement or press release to say that, David Ajala has left the show. But then again, he was not a series regular, so maybe they wouldn't announce that. But it seems like there's been no official thing saying that Manchester's left or that Manchester is officially dead. I mean, it seems like he's dead. I mean, he kind of faded out of existence. I don't really know how he's going to come back from that. But, I mean, it's never stopped the Reverse Flash, so who knows. But I feel like, Manchester probably is dead. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. He could come back by the end of the season, and we could have the Elite coming back and things like that, which I kind of hope is true, because I love the Elite and I love Manchester. So hopefully it will come back, but again, I can't really see how it would come back. But regardless of all of that, I just think that all these moments between Jean and Manchester were just so well sold, thanks to David Harewood and his tremendous acting in this episode. Now, of course, at the end of the last episode, we saw James get shot, and he is now in hospital in this episode. He had a bullet go through his spine, and it seems like, even though he is going to be okay, he is going to survive. The bullet wound is basically going to cause paralysis, best case scenario. So, this kind of leads into a conflict where we have Kelly Olsen being introduced into this episode, played by Azzy Tesfaye. I think that's how you pronounce it. I made a video about her yesterday, being upgraded to a series regular. But she's introduced in this episode, and we have this conflict between her and Alex where, she wants to put James into a regular surgery, and Alex wants to use the Hyronel, developed by Lena, to potentially completely cure James and get him back to how he was. And this was kind of interesting because I like the fact that James's sister wasn't so gung-ho about it, because, the character of Kelly Olsen, she's never met these people before. She's never met Lena before. I mean, she's met Kara before. It seems like her and Kara did know each other. Like, when Alex said that James's sister was in, like, Kara said, oh, Kelly, like, she knew about her. And I think that they had met before, but other than Kara, like, she didn't know Alex, she didn't know Lena, so when it was like, oh yeah, Lena has this thing that could help you, it made sense that Kelly would be very apprehensive about that, especially because it's a Luthor they're talking about. So I think that made a lot of sense, and I think that Alex also was very justified in her opinion that she just wanted to help James, and she trusted Lena. I thought it was all really well done, but anyway, eventually Lena does come down to the hospital with the Hyronel, and they do inject it into James, and he's okay, he does survive, he comes out. We don't actually see him walk. I assume he will walk because of something that happens that I'll talk about in a minute, but I think James is pretty much healed now. But I have to say, I think that the writers and the actors did a really good job of actually putting some tension in this situation with James, because obviously we were debating last week on this episode that, is James actually dead? Because Supergirl has never killed off a major cast member, so it was kind of like, are they actually going to do that with James? Especially because James is kind of expendable, and being the introduction of his sister, would they just replace the character? Like, it'd be interesting if they did that. But no, James does survive in this episode, unless he dies again, like if he gets shot or something again by the end of the season, but at this point, he's alive, so I guess that's how it's going to go. Now, the ending scene of this episode was pretty crazy. We have Lena coming up back to the house, and Lex is there in his wheelchair, and she basically says, no, I'm not testing the Hyronel on you, I'm not doing it, you're an evil person, all this conflict that we've been dealing with for the past episode was all caused by you, I'm not going through with it. And then he basically says, oh, well, screw you, because I've already had it injected into me, and he stands up out of his wheelchair, and we actually see that Eve Tessmocker, of all people, betrayed Lena for Lex. So Eve has been working with Lex the entire time, and this security guard who's been a bit of an arsehole the entire episode is actually Otis Graves, who is still alive from earlier in the season. I really don't know how I feel about this, because Eve Tessmocker is one of the most unassuming characters you could possibly get on this show. She's so understated, she's so, just so not somebody you would think about when it came to a traitor, and she was kind of irrelevant. She was kind of gone from this show for a long time. Like, she was very prominent in season 1, and then in 2 and 3 she wasn't really there, and now in 4 she's kind of come back out of nowhere, and I guess this is why. But this villainous turn for Eve, I actually think could be quite interesting, because it actually makes her a bit more of a character rather than just a walking meme, basically. So it does give her something to do, but I cannot stand the fact that Otis Graves is back alive. Otis Graves is the worst thing about this season so far. He was dreadful. I was so happy in episode 4 when he got killed off. I mean, is Mercy alive as well? Like, his sister, is she still alive? I assume she will be. I reckon she'll actually end up being Lex's bodyguard, like she is in the comics, because that would make sense. But I can't believe they brought Otis back. Like, when I saw his face, I was just like, no fucking way is that happening. I was gobsmacked. I was like, no way have they brought back that character, and they've only gone and done it. So, I don't know. Do you like Otis Graves? Maybe you do. I don't. I think he's awful. Oh, God. But anyway, besides all of that, this was still a pretty great episode of Supergirl once again, continuing its hot streak coming off the mid-season premiere. I think that this episode, again, it was really about introducing Lex Luthor into this world, and I think that John Cryer did a good job. Like I said, a bit iffy at first, but as the episode went on, it did become a lot better and a lot stronger, and the James conflict actually did have me on the edge of my seat, and the Manchester Black and John, kind of interaction was really, really great, especially from the standpoint of David Harewood's acting, which was just beautiful in this episode. It was fantastic. So overall, good episode, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you guys for tuning into this episode of DC Central. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss an upload, and I hope to see you guys again next time.